So 1968.
Where were you in 1968?
Well, I was a I was a senior in high school in '68 in the fall during the World Series. Um, but as the '68 season began, I was finishing up my junior year in high school. I had a job at Sears. Uh, I had been in the automotive service department. Then they moved me into the catalog department, and I managed that. And the nice thing about that is that they had me working afternoons and weekends on Saturdays. And I'd go in, and there would only be a couple of ladies up front doing their business, and then I'd be in the back, and I'd have the ball game on. And I listened to every ball game from probably the middle of May to the end of the season. I did not miss a game. Didn't miss a pitch, a strikeout, an out, a home run, nothing. I heard it all.
Was Ernie Harwell was the announcer?
Yeah, in those days you had Ray Lane, Ernie Harwell, George Kell, and there was another fella too, and his name escapes me at the moment. But Ernie and Ray did the radio. George Kell and the other fella did television. And every once in a while, one of the guys would be off, and they'd sub for one another. Ernie was the best. No question about it. We won't talk a lot about Ernie because anybody who knows Detroit knows Ernie. And the guy was just a prince of a guy. What can you say about him? He knew baseball. You learned from him. Every time the guy was at the microphone, he would tell you something about the history of the sport, or a history of this particular team, or the history of this guy that's at bat that's hitting 350 this year, or whatever it happened to be. And he'd talk about what the pitches were, and why this guy's slider is so good, and or Phil Necro or somebody was pitching, why that knuckleball did what it did, why it was so hard to catch. You learned from the guy, and I just loved that. Ray Lane was also a sportscaster in at WXYZ, I believe, Channel 7 in Detroit. And he was very good at what he did. I was disappointed when he retired. At any rate, here's just a few of the highlights I recall from that '68 year. They were the comeback kids. I think they came back to win 28 games that were in the late innings, either the 8th or 9th inning, and they were down by 2 or more runs. And they came back to win those. Championship teams do that because they play like champions all the time. And even if they're down, they're never out. And, you don't get to win 100, 105, 110 games by, just showing up. You have to play with heart, and that team did. The heroics of the players that turned to and did jobs they weren't necessarily assigned to do. You had Al Kaline get hurt right in the middle of the season. What a terrible time for that guy's bat to be out of the lineup. Holy smokes, everybody's going, oh man, we're done now. But everybody stepped up. You had Dick McAuliffe, who, was a great bat anyway, and he picked up the pace. And Northrup, guy hits 4 Grand Slam home runs. I mean, people were afraid to pitch to him, especially with runners on the base. I mean, the guy was phenomenal. Just a little side note, I met Jim Northrup in I want to say it was early August of '68. Just by happenstance, we lived across the street from a neighbor by the name of Henry Daniel. And Henry was the plant manager for Fisher Body in Pontiac on Baldwin Street. And somehow he seemed to know everybody. And he was having a party at his house, and he called me on the phone. Now, Mr. Daniel was, well into his 50s, and why would he call a 17-year-old kid? I had no idea, but I answered the phone, and he said, "Wayne." I said, "Yes, sir." It's Henry Daniel. Or he called himself Hank. He said, "Hank Daniel." I said, "Yes, sir. What can I do for you? Need your lawn mowed?" Whatever. That's kind of the stuff I did in those days, too. He said, no, I'm going to have a party at my house. He said, Jim Northrup's going to be here around 5 o'clock. He said, "You think you could come over? Would you like to meet him?" And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? Pinch me, Poopsie. Am I dreaming here? Oh, this is great. This guy's my hero. Anyway, I agreed, and I went over and got to meet the guy. And I'm looking up at him. I'm, 5'10". He was, 6'1" or 2", something like that. And, the picture of a professional athlete. And I don't remember. I asked him a question, some lame question. You don't even know what to ask these guys. And, congratulated him on the Tigers' win that day. And he said, "Oh, thank you," and he went back to talking to the real adults. But anyway, I was just glad to have met him. Got his autograph. Still have that. And anyway, to him, it was just another kid who was, happy to be there. And to me, it was the thing that made the whole summer. It really did. That summer was a much nicer summer. Very moderate temperatures that year, and the humidity was up during July, but for the rest of the year, or for the rest of the summer, it was pretty nice. And tempers had long since quelled, and Detroit was doing some things to bring the city back together. Communication was a big piece of it. I remember going to a couple of games when I could get the time off of work, and sitting in Tiger Stadium. Sky just crystal clear blue, and the temperatures were nice. It's a perfect day for a ball game. Of course, I was a bleacher creature in those days, but eventually balls did get out to our part of the world. And it was fun just to be a part of it. You didn't have to be right behind home plate and hear the players cursing at each other and scratching themselves and all that kind of stuff. You're far enough away where all that stuff was not even evident to you. But you just loved being there. And they kept winning and kept winning. And guys like Joe Falls and Mitch Albom would write for the Free Press. And they would talk about this team and how much better it is this year. And, what are they going to do without K-Line? And then suddenly Mickey Lolich, Mr. Rubber Arm, roly-poly Mickey Lolich. He goes into a slump. He's like 0 for 17 games or something. I mean, I think it was 12. But it seemed like it was 17. You're going, oh, no. We're going to tank. We don't have Mick. We don't have Al. What's going to happen now? But McLean, he was like a train. He just kept going and mowing them down. The guy lost 6 games that year against 32 wins. Nobody will ever do that again. We don't play ball that way anymore. You have guys that are up against pitch counts. Okay, 120, you're out of there. It doesn't matter how good you feel. A guy like Verlander can get away with it and say, I'm staying for the rest of the game. Who's going to argue with him, right? But they're trying to preserve the guy's arms. Mickey was a phenomenal guy. He had he had the ability to just continue to throw the ball and throw it right. And he was a very hard guy to hit. One of the things that always amazed me about Mickey was that he was pitching in a game that went into extra innings. I can't remember how many. It was 13 or 14 or something. And it was called because of darkness. Well, it was dark a whole long time ago, but it was like 1 o'clock in the morning they called the game. And they resumed the game the next day. And who's on the mound? Mickey. Really? You're going to pitch the rest of this game? And he did. And he won the game. Now, that's the quality of guy he was. I mean, he just had this wonderful work ethic. He was never diffused by anything. He just moved to the next thing that he had to do.
Is that one of those reasons why you questioned Mayo Smith, because he did stuff like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would never happen today. Today's prima donnas would say, I'm not pitching that game. Not Mickey. That's my game. And, of course, Mickey had this attitude that, he liked baseball, loved the sport, but wasn't married to it. Okay, you don't let me ride my motorcycle to the park, well, then I quit. And he actually had that conversation with the owner of the Tigers, who saw him riding his motorcycle and into the stadium, the parking lot, and called him on it. He said, "You're not going to ride that bike anymore." And Mickey said, "Yeah, I am." He said, "No, you're not." "Yeah, I am." "No, you're not." "Okay, I quit." Well, no, you can't quit. "Yeah, I did. I'm going to ride my bike or I quit." He said, well, they got to talking, long story short. Come to find out, the owner of the Tigers at that time had been in World War II, and he rode a motorcycle in combat. That was his job. He was a courier. And anyway, they came to an agreement that Mickey had to wear a helmet and he couldn't ride on the days he was going to pitch. So, okay, that's fine. The rest of the time you can ride your bike. But you have to wear a helmet. Okay, so Mickey acquiesced, and that's how he stayed with the team. I often wonder sometimes if he really would have quit. Knowing Mickey and his personality, I think he probably would have. He'd have gone someplace else to play. Anyway, Mickey finally came alive in August, and he started to win. He reeled off 8 consecutive wins. And Al, amazingly, came back into the lineup in August and picked up right where he left off. I mean, it was like the guy never missed a game. Talking about Mr. Consistent, that was Al. He was the consummate professional ball player. The other fellas, Gates Brown, you want a home run, call on Gates to be the pinch hitter. Now there's a funny story that goes with Gates Brown. Gates was a big man, and he liked to eat. He'd get hungry a lot. Anyway, he's sitting on the bench, and he's thinking, I'm riding pine today. I mean, we're doing good. And he gets hungry, and he goes back into the locker room, which you're not supposed to do. He comes out, and he's got a couple of hot dogs with mustard on them. Well, he doesn't even get to eat the hot dogs, and Mayo Smith calls him to pinch hit. Now he's got to decide, what am I going to do with these hot dogs? I know if I put them down here, they'll be gone by the time I get back, and I want my hot dogs. I'm hungry. So he stuffs them in his shirt. And he goes out and he hits. And if memory serves me correctly, I believe he hit a double, but he had to slide in to do it. And he didn't slide in on his hip. He slid in on his stomach. And when he gets up, he's got mustard squeezing through his shirt, his jersey. And the guys in the booth are going, "Has he got all over his shirt?" They're debating what it was that might be. Well, it was mustard. And of course, he got fined for that. And he didn't have any hot dogs to eat anyway now. So, but it was just one of the funny things about the game and about the personality of some of the guys who play. But everybody loved the Gator. Same with Willie. Willie was just a phenomenal player. He hit some of the most mammoth home runs you've ever seen. And he could do it with one hand. And he'd take batting practice and he'd get up there and he'd take a ball and he'd swat it and go over the left field fence. And he could do that all day long. The guy was just a phenomenally strong guy.
Was he the one that could hit home runs one-handed?
Yes, and he did. Not in every game, obviously, but more than once. And anyhow, the '68 team had probably 3 4 or 5 star players. Everybody else was just really good. Northrup hated being platooned, and he did get a little vocal about it with management. They played him as often as they could. Mayo knew how to manage that team, and he did it well. And at any rate, they continued to win, and then they get into the series, and the series was a real roller coaster ride. I mean, you don't lose the first 2 games to St. Louis. Nobody does, and come back to win the rest of it. And when they came back to Detroit, when they came to Detroit after the first loss, we thought, okay, here we go. Well, it's raining like crazy out there. And we get nothing. It just, we're now down 2 games to nothing. Beaten on our home turf. And then it's back to St. Louis. Or did we play 2 games? We may have played 2 games at that time. First game at St. Louis, next to at Detroit, and then back to St. Louis for the last. I don't remember. It doesn't matter, I guess. At any rate, we were nervous. Every baseball fan in Detroit was thinking, oh no, this can't be the end of it. With Bob Gibson, Kurt Flood, and Lou Brock, you're thinking, and Nelson Bryles was somebody that you needed to deal with too. I mean, he was no piker. That guy could pitch. And anyway, we're thinking, how are we going to beat these guys? And Mickey never thought twice about how these games were going to go. And he went out with the attitude, I'm winning this game. Mickey won 3 games in a World Series. Who does that? It's been done a couple of times, but only a couple of times. And anyway, not only that, he hit a home run in the second game, and everybody was amazed. The guys in the booth are going, ball's hit well. It's up there. That ball's out of here. I don't believe it. Mickey Lolich hit a home run. Do you believe that? Those are the guys from St. Louis. Guys from Detroit are going, I can't believe it. Mickey hit a home run. Mickey couldn't believe it. Anyway, he also got a couple other hits during the series. And up to that point, he was like, 1.6 or something. Or 0.16 or something. I mean, the guy he didn't hit. He didn't care.
He was in the American League.
Yeah. Well, at that time, I don't think the designated hitter rule was in effect in '68. I could be wrong. Was it?
I don't recall.
I don't think it was. But nobody ever expected the pitcher to get a hit, let alone a home run. And anyway, Mickey went out and won his 3 games, and McLean lost his. He did win the final game he pitched, but we were really pinning our hopes on him. And we're extraordinarily disappointed and really, frankly, baffled that they hit him the way as well as they did. I think that it was the other details of the game that really mattered more than that. It was the fact that Mickey pitches 3 gems, hits a home run to his own benefit, and really acted as a catalyst to spark the team to a higher level of performance. And then you have the miraculous throw by none other than Willie Horton from left field. And here comes Brock around third. And Willie unleashes a strike straight for freehand. I mean, this thing was on line. He never even thought about hitting a cutoff man. I mean, he just threw a strike at freehand because, Brock was just exceedingly fast. I mean, that guy could smoke. And here he comes, doing one of the dumbest things that he could possibly do. But in his arrogance, he did it anyway. He ran into Bill Freehand, who played football for the University of Michigan. He had been hit by big guys before, and Brock wasn't a particularly big guy. He didn't even move Freehand. He tried to stick his foot in there and pretend like he was safe, but he was clearly out. I mean, he was touched before his foot ever even got close to that bag. And like I said, he didn't move Freehand, and he kind of spun around Freehand. I'm not sure it wasn't his own momentum that carried him. It's that irresistible force that hit that immovable object, if you will. And he came around and he tried to touch the bag again. Now, if ever there was a guilty guy, he knew he was out. Otherwise, why would he try to come around and touch that bag again? But he was called out, and it was right. And the photographs of that day show that his foot, although close, was still about this far away from the bag, or the plate. So at any rate, it's those kinds of things that can energize a team and change the momentum completely. And beating Bob Gibson when he was a giant of a guy. I mean, he was tall, he was big, he was strong, he just threw rockets. And here's little Mickey Lolich, and he's smoking him. And he's making Gibson look bad. Really is. Bob didn't even finish that game. He was out probably by the 7th inning, I think. They didn't want the game to get out of hand because they read the Tigers right. These are the comeback kids of '68. Who's to say they're not going to come back in this game? Well, they weren't even behind yet. And that's, they were early on, but they had already caught up and started to put some distance between them and the Cardinals. Let's fast forward here to the last game of that series, and we win it. Now, Chris, that city went nuts for the second time in 2 years, but this time it went nuts because everybody was so happy we won that series. You can't imagine the difference in the attitudes of the people. People coming out of stores, running onto Woodward Avenue, onto Jefferson, onto Michigan Avenue, coming out of their houses. It didn't matter whether you were a cop or a fireman or Joe the Haberdashers. I mean, you came out, people were slapping each other on the back and high-fiving and hugging each other and celebrating. cars going down the road with people hanging all out of the windows and sitting on the roofs, yelling and hollering, waving their pennants, and just celebrating like I've never seen before or since. I've seen a lot of celebrations, post series celebrations as the news presents them. None of them compare to the celebration that happened in '68 when the Tigers won that final game. It galvanized the city in a way that nothing else could. And who would have imagined a baseball game could get people who were hating each other 12 months earlier to embracing each other and celebrating like they were long-lost brothers? It just defies logic, but it did happen, and it happened that way. The Tigers were a special team. They'll always be a special team. Even though they had a couple of guys that couldn't hit their way out of a wet paper bag. I mean, they were fantastic fielders.
Ray
Euler, Wirt wasn't all that great, but they were great fielders, and you need those guys. And we had a good bullpen. It wasn't a strong bullpen, but we didn't really need it when you had two guys that could go complete games. These guys would sit for 3 or 4 days without pitching a single inning. And that's unheard of today. You milk your bullpen today. To me, not to take anything away from the athletes of today, but those people were real athletes. I mean, down to their core, they were athletes. They loved the game. Today, it's about money. It's about fame. It's about personal aggrandizement. But there are some that do love the game. I think the young guys really love the game. But once they've made their tens of millions, things tend to change. Like one guy that hasn't been so affected in that way is Miguel Cabrera. There are other guys too, but just by virtue of the fact that he's here and he's obvious, and you can get a sense for who a guy is after 10 or 15 years, and he does the same thing over and over and over, and he contributes not only to the team but to his community and so forth. He's got a great reputation. It'll be a sad day if they should trade Miguel Cabrera. He's just a great ball player, and he exemplifies the spirit of the Detroit Tigers, in my view. What else do you need? Oh, let's. You were asking about a couple of other things that took place after the '68 season. It was not unusual for ball clubs in those days to protect good players, and they did it. They did it for the reason that they didn't want these men being drafted. Vietnam was from '67 to '69 was at the height of its intensity, and we had well over 1 million men on the ground at that time, and more were needed. So they'd find ways of getting them into the National Guard or the reserves or some program to keep them off of active duty for more than 3 months. And it happened that the Tigers had 4 guys they wanted to protect. 3 of them were in AAA ball, 1 was an active player. The 3 that I'm thinking about were Doug Swiss, who was a catcher, Mike Adams, who was a second baseman, and Jim Tanner, who was a right fielder. And then there was a 4th guy. And my memory's fuzzy because we're going back 50 years ago, but I'm thinking it was Darrell Patterson. And I had a chance to meet with that individual, who I believe was him, on one occasion. And it was pretty obvious to me he wasn't real excited about being in that program. But it sure beat the dickens out of being in Southeast Asia, sweating your rear end off getting shot at. So anyway, he was there. I lost track of him after that one day. I never saw him again. And as I said, I lost track of him, but the one occasion that I did meet with him, we were in a classroom together. I just happened to sit down next to him. I didn't know who he was. And I like making friends, so I looked over and I saw him, and he was just looking like, I don't want to be here. So I said, "Hi, I'm Wayne Brandon." And I stuck my hand out. He shook my hand and he introduced himself. And I glanced over and I looked at his name tag. And I'm pretty sure it said Patterson on it. And I didn't know what the guy looked like, but I looked at a picture here with you a couple of days ago, and I'm pretty sure that was him. At any rate, it doesn't really matter other than the fact that Tigers had these 4 guys in the Army Reserve system. And then there was some conversation about flags being placed on their orders. They couldn't go to basic training, they couldn't go to any schools, they couldn't do anything because they had been enlisted on January 1st, 1969. And everybody knows, if you know anything about the government at all, that nobody's doing any paperwork on January 1st of any year.
Nope.
For any reason. And anyhow, the sergeant major of the unit had been paid off by the organization or somebody, we'll just say that. And these 4 guys who were just doing what the club told them to do got caught up in this stuff. I'm going to tell you right now, these were good guys. When you soldier with somebody, you as well as anybody know that you get to know them. And you'd know them if they were shuck and jivers, or if they were turkeys, or gold bricks. Not these 4 guys, no. All of them were smart guys. They hustled. They were leaders. I mean, you could sense it in them. Doug Swiss, for example, was the guy I probably knew as well as the other guys. Jim Tanner was the one I knew best. But Doug was the kind of guy that, he was an older fella compared to me. I mean, I think he was about 22 or 23. He was in AAA Toledo. And he took time to talk to an 18-year-old kid. And I'd ask him questions, and he'd talk to me like I'm talking to you. Anyway, I always kind of admired the guy. And then there was Jim Tanner. Jim became a personal friend. He was traded to St. Louis at some point during that first year. And he'd come back from St. Louis to Michigan for his drill weekends, and he'd stay with me in order to save money. I mean, when you're in AAA ball, you're not making a whole lot of money, and you got to buy a plane ticket back and all that kind of stuff. So, he stayed with me, and we built a pretty good relationship, pretty good friendship. And then there was Mike Adams. Mike was quiet. I didn't get the impression that he particularly liked being a soldier either, but he did his job and kept to himself, kept quiet. Mike eventually went on to play ball in the major leagues. Played for Minnesota. I think he was with the club, or at least in the system, for about 5 years. Whether or not he played all of that with Minnesota, I really don't know. But he was one of those guys like a Ray Oyler. He didn't hit a lick, but man, nothing got by him. And little story about these 4 guys. or those three guys again. Patterson, I didn't never caught up with again, but these other three guys were in my battalion, and anyway, we went to I think it was Fort Knox, Kentucky, or it might have even been Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. I don't remember. And the full-time unit that we capstoned with that year had the division championship baseball team, and they challenged us to a game. And we're thinking to ourselves, yeah, okay, no problem. And of course, we stacked the deck with 3 professional ball players. And we also had the champion fastball or fast pitch softball champion from Flint that year, who was our pitcher. And this guy threw smoke. And between the 4 of those guys, I mean, they could have won the game by themselves. They didn't need the rest of us. But every time that they came up, they try to throw a softball past them. How fast does softball go? 60, 70 miles an hour? How fast does a fastball go? It's a smaller target, and it's going 30 miles an hour faster. And they were crushing this ball. I mean, one after another after another. We're going over the fence or up against the fence, and always past whoever the outfielders were. And then finally, they just look and watch the ball go over, run over and get it. And that was the best they could do. And of course, there were other guys on the team that could hit too, and we trounced them. I know it was like 13-3 or something. And then when they found out that we had ringers, why they weren't real happy, but they had to admit we beat them fair and square. Another little incident was where Jim came up. It was in March, and spring training had started. He was at spring training with the Cardinals, and he came up to go to the drill that weekend, and he asked me, or he told me, he said, look, I'm hitting 327 right now, and I want to keep that average going. He said, this is my best chance I think I'm going to have to make it into the majors. He said, would you mind throwing me some balls so I can keep my timing and my swing down? And sure. So we got a bucket of balls, went out to the local school, they had a backstop, and I was throwing him some balls, and it was March in Michigan, so it was cold, and it took me a good while to warm up. And finally, I warmed up, and everything I was throwing him, he was hitting. Some stuff went a mile, and some stuff, he was taking it easy on me, and it only went a few feet past the mound. But anyway, finally, I got warmed up and reared back and threw a fastball, and he just watched it go by. And I thought, well, it was probably too close or something was wrong with it. He picked up the ball and he threw it back to me. And he said, can you do that again? I said, do what? He said, throw the ball like that. I said, yeah, I can. He said, throw me another one. So I threw him another one. This time he fouled that one off. And he said, you ever think of playing professional baseball? I said, no. He said, you throw as hard as the guys that I have seen at spring training and throughout AAA ball. And he said, if you want, I can get you a walk-in, or an appointment as a walk-on with the Cardinals. I can talk to Red when I go back, and we'll get you an invitation. And I said, well, I don't know, let me think about it. I threw him some more balls. And I did tell him, though, that I had a little secret to confess. And he said, what's that? And I said, I can throw about a half a dozen or maybe 10 of those fastballs like that. I said, the next one's likely to take your head off because I lose control after that. He said, well, they can teach that out of you and teach you how to keep control. Oh, I said, well, let me think about it. And he asked me again on his next trip in. He said, when are you gonna walk on? He said, I can get you that walk on. And I said, no. I was in college at the time, and I said, I'm studying to be a policeman. That's what I'm going to do. I've often wondered how life might have been different had I gone. Some of the things I thought about, some of the things that went through my mind is, just because you can throw a ball hard and fast doesn't mean that you're going to make it in the major leagues or even, through the farm system. You can't be a one-trick pony. You can't throw one ball and get away with it. Not for long. I had no idea how to throw a good curve ball, sinker ball. I just didn't know. I tried throwing them and they, bounce off the ground or, go way outside the plate. I could never get them over the plate. And even when I did, they were so slow and fat. It's like hitting a turtle. The guys would crush them. So, I'm thinking to myself, you could be a hero or a zero depending upon how things came about. And then you'd be that much farther behind in your studies. And so I just made a calculated decision and went with that. But sometimes you think back about life. How would life be different? Maybe I did make it for a few years. How would my life be different? And I think about the fact that I wouldn't have met your mother. You guys wouldn't exist. You'd be somebody else. And I'm happy with the way life is. I'm happy the way it turned out. Professional baseball was never in the cards, so that's how it is.
Yeah, I think that's something everybody thinks about is, all those little things that you did that you could have done differently and how your life would have turned out. But I don't know. I think it's always going to be a tough question to ask yourself, but I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason.
It sure does.
All right. Well, Dad, I think we've reached a good point. I want to thank you for taking this time to do this.
Thanks for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Absolutely. All right.